Okay, so topic 8.6. This is the second to last topic, the penultimate topic in the ecology unit that we're going to be talking about, and it is all about biodiversity and why it's important specifically. So I have some images over here, as you can probably see. Let me actually put some slideshow mode, it's a little bigger. There we go. Over here I have a picture of the rainforest. As you can see, a very diverse area. There's a waterfall. There's tons and tons and tons of different species here. If you watched my last video and you were to do a diversity index on the just the plant species in this rainforest area, you get an incredibly high number for diversity because this is an extremely diverse area, one of the most diverse areas on Earth. Conversely, I have over here this desert, as you can see, not a very diverse area. A few types of trees. There's probably some animal life in here, some insects, arthropods hanging around here in the desert. But there's not too much life, maybe small mammal life. Not a lot of life, not really teeming with life in the desert, particularly the Sahara Desert. Okay, let's go look down here. I have another picture. This is of a coral reef. These coral reefs are disappearing. Very important ecosystems on this planet, and they're slowly being destroyed due to bleaching. And we are trying to save them desperately, or at least there's many noble people out there dedicated to this cause. But they're very important to the ecosystem, extremely important to these different types of fish. And as this reef is destroyed, these fish will lose their habitat, and we lose all of this diversity, this biodiversity we see down here. So, when talking about biodiversity, I guess we can go back and define it. And if you were here, or if you saw some videos earlier, we did define it. It's the variety of life in a particular ecosystem, right? How varied is that life? We did some calculations earlier concerning biodiversity. How varied is the life in each ecosystem? Is it very diverse? That's the question we're going to be asking today. Okay, biodiversity. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the relationship between the ecosystem and whether it is more or less resilient to change. So in very diverse environments, in other words, with a Simpsons, you saw this earlier, if the Simpsons diversity index is high, then the resistance to change is also high. What do I mean by resistance to change? Well, I mean exactly that. The population sizes, etc., the things that make this ecosystem what it is, are more resistant to change if the diversity index is higher. They're more resistant to change. This is good. The more diverse an ecosystem is, the less likely it is to be dramatically changed by the addition or removal of a species. Invasive species are less effective in these types of environments. Now, if that diversity index, however, is very low, if the diversity index is low, then change is very drastic. I'll just put drastic change in this ecosystem. Drastic change. Not a good thing. Not a good thing, right? You don't want to see this these ecosystems being destroyed, but we unfortunately see it around the world. We are seeing it right now as the Amazon rainforest is burning. Being burnt down for grazing land for cattle. Of course, grazing land, grass, is not very diverse. It is not. So this is the second situation where you have drastic changes can take place in these ecosystems. It's not going to. This rainforest is not going to be able to support what it used to support if it's just being used for cattle. So that's fairly important. It's fairly relevant. So write your congressman. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this kind of classic example here. We have. I want to talk a little bit about keystone species. You have this food chain here. Obviously, at the bottom, you have our autotroph. I don't know if that's a word you guys are familiar with. Autotroph, producer level. This is kelp. This is kelp. These little sea urchins here are our, and this is review as well, primary consumer. And then this, of course, is our cute little sea otter. Secondary consumer. And, of course, our orca, our killer whale up here, our tertiary consumer. Okay, so we have a little food web and some graphs to go along with it. They correspond with each of these levels here. So let's take a look. What's happening to, if you want to look at it from the top here, let's look at it from the top. What's happening to the sea otter population over time? This is time. This graph on the bottom. You're going to notice that the sea otter population here is going down. It's going down. So how does that affect these lower levels? If the sea otter population is going down, these sea otters eat, right? These sea otters eat these sea urchins, right? So if there's less sea otters, you're going to see the sea urchin population increase. Of course, if this population increases, what is that going to cause at the level below, at this producer level? You're going to see a decrease in this life, this kelp life. Now, this is pretty important because if you lose, what this is essentially saying, if you lose this single species right here, this species, you lose it or it drops in size, you're losing your producers. And that's really bad because they help us yank CO2 out of the air, right? These are what help remove CO2 from the air on our planet. So this otter, and this is kind of the classic example, is a keystone species. A keystone species. Okay? So a keystone species is any species in which removal causes drastic change. Causes drastic change in an ecosystem. So, biodiversity is very important. It's important to keep all these animals. You may not think about the sea otter as one that's hugely important, but as you can see, it's very important to removing CO2 from our atmosphere, even though it may not immediately seem so. Anyways, this is just a little kind of brief chat about biodiversity and why it's important. Please know the definition of a keystone species. It's fairly important. And know that as diversity increases, ecosystems are more resistant to change. If diversity is low, drastic change is more likely to happen in that ecosystem. Okay, thanks for listening.